in the bulletin. Meanwhile, Drew, another big story bubbling away. Tom Stewart's tribunal hearing has been done and dusted. It's all wrapped up. How did it all unfold?
So a 4-game ban for Tom Stewart, Kath. So that's what the AFL were aiming for tonight as they gave evidence to the tribunal. The Cats were asking for a 3-game ban. So I guess it makes these tribunal cases quite interesting when they go in knowing there's absolutely going to be a suspension. It's just a case of how many weeks. So the AFL asked for 4, and I'll give you a succinct summary of the AFL's argument tonight for 4 games. Kath, they said the bump was delivered at speed after Stewart had gone past the ball and Prestia unexpected and vulnerable to being seriously injured. Concussion is a serious injury in itself, and it's the very reason the charge of rough conduct by bump was introduced. Now, there were a couple of examples that were referred to tonight, Kath. A Sam Reid bump on Nat Fyfe, which was a 2-game suspension, but that was graded as high impact and not severe. And then a more recent example with the exact same grading was Patrick Dangerfield's bump on Jake Kelly of Adelaide. That was a 3-game ban for Dangerfield. Now, in that occasion, Jake Kelly was left with a fractured nose and he was knocked out cold and taken off on a Medicab. So Geelong were keen to refer to that incident specifically to say, well, if you put the two up against each other and Dangerfield is moving like a cannonball towards Jake Kelly in that bump, and Kelly is clearly left pretty seriously injured. On this occasion, when you look at the way that Stewart approaches Dion Prestia, they talk about the fact that he slows down because the ball bounces up quite high and then Prestia has to stop and prop and then eventually decides to tap it back over his head. And that Stewart didn't approach with the same velocity and therefore exert the same amount of impact that Dangerfield did. So they said, well, taking that all into account, perhaps a 3-game ban because he ran past the ball is the right place to land. Ultimately, as the AFL and the tribunal deliberated for around 45 minutes or so, they eventually landed on a 4-game ban. I can give you a little taste of what they said. The tribunal chairperson, Jeff Gleeson, Kathy says, given what is known about consequences of blows to the head, all reasonable steps must be taken to prevent avoidable blows to the head. Mr Stewart accepts this was avoidable and therefore it is a 4-game sanction. So Tom Stewart misses on Saturday night against North Melbourne at GMHBA Stadium. The Cats then have a 5-day break and they take on Melbourne at GMHBA Stadium, then games against Carlton and Port Adelaide. Tom Stewart suspended for 4 games.
Never an easy task, tribunal duties, Drew Jones, but you've done a good job in wrapping that up for us. Thank you. We will chat to or hear from you later on in the evening on AFL 360 as well.